Can you hear me okay? Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you, Kyle. All right, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for being here this evening. So my name is Abby Yelman. I'm the Deputy City and County Manager for the City and County of Broomfield. As we go through the night, you'll obviously see a bunch of our staff as well, some presenting and then also some just attending to learn more right alongside all of you. So thank you for being here. I would be remiss not to thank our council members that are with us tonight. Mayor Castriota is here. Councilmember Marsh Holshin is here. Councilmember Anderson, Councilmember Cohen, and we were just talking about the Chiefs, but I said I wouldn't make any jokes because I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm sorry, so I have to apologize. I do know we'll have a couple more council members I know that are running from one event to another event, so they'll be here in a little bit. So just wanted to thank all of you for being here. We do have viewers obviously in person with us tonight and also online. So I wanted to thank our online viewers for joining us. And I believe this will also be recorded so people can view later because we know not everything works for everybody's schedule. Councilmember Lim is joining us. Hi, Councilmember Lim. I didn't want to forget you. Welcome. All right. So we're excited. This has been definitely a labor of love a little bit for the city and county staff. Taking a lot of research to really make sure that we know what universal hauling is, that education piece, making sure we fully understand. So I think the biggest message I wanted to kind of just share with all of you tonight is I'm just like you. I'm here tonight to learn more. We are definitely in the early stage. This is part of where you all come in. That feedback is really important. We have surveys. I think you can actually take the survey before you leave tonight if you'd like. You can take it online. There's a voice page. They'll talk all about how you can engage and give us your feedback. I know you also have question cards tonight. I'm sure Allison will cover all of that, but basically just a reminder, we're in the early stage. So your feedback's really important. My husband and I were having a discussion before tonight, and I just said, I got to go in curious, right? I got to go in curious and be willing to listen and learn right alongside with the staff that's presenting. So I kind of know as a resident myself, what does this mean for me? And again, we're not going to know every answer tonight, but we'll do the best we can to answer all the questions that you have. So basically, we'll start here tonight with an explanation of why we're here, our goals for the evening, and what residents can expect moving forward. There's going to be a lot of engagement moving forward as well. And then with us tonight, I'd be remiss not to introduce the team. So I'm going to make them stand up because they hate when I do that. So the first person I'm going to introduce is our Director of Strategic Initiatives, Danae Brouillard, who is right back there. Hi, Danae. Also our Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives, Allison Harvey, who we welcomed back not too long ago. We're excited to have Allison back. We also have our Director of Communications, Julie Story, who's in the back of the room as well. Our Director of Public Works, Ken Rutt. Yep, I made him stand up. That's right. That's right, Broncos fan. I'm making you stand up. And then we also have our sustainability team with us, Garrett, and I believe it's Alex. Thank you for the grace on that one. I haven't got to meet Alex in person yet, so I'm excited about that. And then we also have Justin Munt and some other staff with us tonight. So if I didn't mention you, thank you for being here. So with that, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Let's get to the program. So I'm going to introduce Allison Harvey. Don't applaud yet.
Thanks for being here. There's so many people in the room and it's great. And it's great to see some of you that we've connected with at our tabling events. So glad you're here. And those of you who are watching online, thanks for joining us too. And if you're watching this at some later date, thanks for taking the time. I want to acknowledge, first of all, that there's a lot of frustration. Maybe a lot of you are frustrated for a variety of reasons. Some people are frustrated with the process. Sorry, I'm not holding the mic up enough because I move my hands when I talk. Thanks, Kyle. There's some frustration with the process. There's some frustration with why are we even having this conversation? There's frustration with why didn't this happen 3 years ago? So we're all in different places and it's all valid. I just wanted to put that out there, and I'm starting this with a big breath, and I invite you to join me with taking a deep breath too. And Abby set us up well for being good listeners and listening to learn tonight, because that's really what we're here to do. We got my too many papers. So we really have two objectives tonight. And the first one is to learn about options for organizing residential waste or trash hauling and recycling in Broomfield. And we're going to be talking about universal waste collection as one of those potential options. And you're going to hear this a lot. We're early in the process. I think there's confusion and anxiety about this because people think decisions have been made. And I want to say that they haven't really. We're still exploring. So we're here to learn together tonight. And we're here to have a panel Q&A. You should have all received, if you wanted, some question cards that look like this. We have them on the back table with pens. If you want one at some point, just put your hand up and one of our staff will bring them to you. I have some pre-populated cards with questions we received from the Broomfield Voice website. So we'll start our panel off with that later. So first, I'll just give you a little run through of what the evening will look like. And I already talked to you about the question cards. I'll come back to those in a minute. See, the bad thing about traveling when you talk is that you lose where you are in your notes. My job is going to be to talk you through what to expect. So, yep, and that's what we're doing right now. Sorry. I love that this is being recorded and my kids are going to be able to watch it later. So the first thing we're going to talk about is why we're here, just a little bit to refresh ourselves and why are we talking about this? Why is the question being raised? And then some basic information about what do we already have? What does it look like for a residential waste hauling system? And you're hearing me say the word residential a lot, and I'll come back to this, but we really, while we know we need to be expanding options for recycling and composting for commercial areas and businesses and large apartment complexes, this particular program is more focused on residences. And there's some legal reasons for that I'll get to later. So I don't want you to all feel left out. We will be looking into options to expand, how do you improve access there, but it's just not part of tonight's program. Then I'm happy that we have with us tonight Randy Mormon from EcoCycle, who's going to help talk more about the need for expanding access to recycling and composting in Broomfield and Colorado in general, and talking about universal waste collection as a tested and proven method for better organizing waste hauling systems in a bunch of different communities across Colorado and also across the nation. After that, we'll hear some remarks from some current and former members of our Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability. So your neighbors, Broomfield residents, people who live here, and about why this might matter to them. And then at that point, we'll be collecting these questions. So I would request that you maybe hold your questions until after the presentations. It's possible we'll answer them, but also if you're like me and you get distracted during presentations, feel free to write it down now and we'll work it out. You can also put more than one question on the card and we'll figure that out too. So after that, we'll have the panel where I'll moderate the panel and we'll read the questions and panelists will answer them. We probably won't be able to answer all the questions tonight. We don't have a lot of time. We may not be able to answer the questions you ask tonight. Something that I am really enjoying about this process is the quality of the questions that we're getting from residents. I don't know why. I didn't eat dinner because I was feeling kind of nervous. Our residents are thinking really critically about what this means for them and our community, and that's great. That's democracy in action. Okay. Right. So if we don't get to all your questions, we will answer them and post the responses on the Broomfield Voice webpage. So if you don't hear about it tonight, don't worry. And it may be over the coming weeks. It's not going to be on Monday. We're going to need a little time to process and follow up. And we've been continuing to receive questions through the Broomfield Voice and email. And our staff is working really hard to be able to answer all those questions publicly and transparently to the best of our ability. And one thing you will know by the end of this is we don't have a lot of answers yet because there are so many different options and it can be quite complicated. So part of our job together is figuring out how to get to the best answers. So why are we here talking about universal waste collection? I'm here because it's my favorite topic. I don't know about you. In 2020, Broomfield City Council adopted some ambitious goals for waste diversion. And what that means is really recycling and compost rates. So how to improve, how much are we recycling, how much are we composting, how do we reduce what our community is sending to landfill? So they're here on the slide, and those goals are by 2025 that we should be recycling or composting about 50%. And just for reference, in 2021, we recycled and composted about 22% of the 69,000 tons of waste that our community generates. So, it's not the worst, but we can do a lot better. And I think Randy will talk more about what those rates look like in other communities. So we have the goals. And then in 2021, staff and external experts were putting together a zero waste action plan to figure out, all right, it's great to have goals, but you can't reach them if you don't take intentional action to figure out what needs to happen. And they've identified that universal waste collection is one of the highest impact actions that we can take to reach these goals. In addition to that, in our 2021 community survey, which goes out to Broomfield residents every 2 years, 61% of the respondents said they were interested in the city and county exploring this option. I want to be clear about that. We're not saying 61% of residents think this is a great idea. I think probably our residents don't know enough about it yet to know if it's a great idea or not. But there was a majority who favored exploring the option, and that's what we're doing. That's why we're here tonight. We've had a lot of questions about that survey and that data point, so I wanted to take a minute now to just say that the community survey is a statistically valid and impartial survey that's run by the National Research Center. So there's national level excellence, technical expertise that goes into this survey. And in 2021, it was available online for everyone. It was also mailed to 8,500 households. I was astonished to learn that. I don't know if that's even the norm in some of the state level surveys we have going on. But about 1,100 of Broomfield residents responded to that survey. Maybe some of you did. I hope so. And that's where that number comes from. So it's not one of these convenient sample surveys that we put up on Broomfield Voice and 100 people respond to. It is more statistically valid. It's not, a large proportion of Broomfield residents, but we feel confident in being able to say, our residents wanted us to look into this, so that's what we're doing. That's where we are. When I summarize what we currently have in our residential waste hauling system in a few minutes, I think you'll understand that we are not going to get to those goals of 50% and 100% diversion by doing nothing or by doing only outreach and education. Changing recycling behavior and composting behavior, it really requires changes in infrastructure and increasing access to the services. And so what we're talking about tonight is one way to do that. Thanks for advancing the slide. All right. So what does it look like for us? You may or may not know that the City and County of Broomfield requires our waste haulers to be licensed. Welcome everyone. And City Council approves new haulers that want to be licensed. It's a process that's handled through the City Clerk's office, City and County Clerk's office. And right now we have 10 haulers who are licensed for residential trash recycling or compost. I'm not going to do the numbers trail on it, except to say, no, I will do it. Sorry, because some of you are going to find that important. But where did it go? Right. Okay, so 10 haulers are licensed. Some of them are offering trash and recycling. Some of them are only offering recycling. There's one who only offers recycling, and there's 2 who are offering only compost. What you need to know is that all of our licensed trash haulers do offer recycling services, and that there are some licensed haulers who are not operating routes in Broomfield right now. So we really have about 4, and they're mostly the larger hauling companies who are servicing our residential areas right now. We wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about this because when I started looking at this issue of waste diversion, recycling, composting, and who handles your trash and how, I thought, well, I know what happens at my front door, but I have no idea what makes that happen. And we can't assess these program options without having that kind of understanding. So what we're seeing from the community survey that's coming in, and also conversations we've had and some outreach that we've done, is that there's not much volume-based pricing happening, and that there's some great lingo for you. And volume-based pricing is one of the things we know that is effective for helping to improve recycling and composting rates. It means if you generate less trash, you pay less, right? You have what you pay is based on the size of the trash cart that you have. So we're not seeing a lot of that in our community. We're also seeing there's not a lot of access to curbside compost services, and people who have compost services they're more often than not contracting it separately. It's not included in a price that's bundled with recycling and trash. Now, HOAs, and I know some of you are here. I think probably some of you that we've been emailing with, but couldn't recognize faces. So we're glad that you're with us or watching. I want to take a moment to say, talk about our outreach process for HOAs, which we're hearing a lot of, well, you haven't talked to me and you didn't talk to my board. And that's valid because that does need to happen. The first phase of our outreach has been really focused on education and understanding the current state. And so what that looks like with HOAs is that we've been talking with the management companies who handle the waste hauling contracts. We're doing data gathering, trying to find out who has contracts, who doesn't, what do they cover, what are you paying, just to get a general sense. And it seems like many HOAs who we've talked with so far do have a contract for trash and recycling. Outside of HOAs, it's up to the individual. And then of course we have our infrastructure that we've invested in as the city and county of Broomfield. We have our recycling center and the Tree Branch recycling program, hazardous waste cleanup events, spring cleanup, and other seasonal opportunities to help reduce what you have to put in the trash and give you other opportunities to recycle it. You can move on. Thank you, Kyle. The picture that's emerging for us as we look at all of this as staff is that actually we have two systems here. If you live in an HOA that has a contract for a trash hauler, you are already enjoying the benefits of a universal waste collection system. If you live outside of an HOA, or you live in an HOA that doesn't have this contract, you've got a choice of multiple haulers, and you've got you can negotiate that individually. There is also, though, no standardized pricing, and the recycling costs are not typically embedded in what you pay for your trash, which is what that embedded cost is happening more often in the HOAs. And you're probably having more trucks on the road in your neighborhood. And for both of our HOA and non-HOA residents, paying the same price regardless of how much trash is generated, and contracting separately for curbside compost. I forgot to say an important point at the start of this, which is that the residential focus of this current state and our universal waste collection program would be single-family residences and apartments, townhomes, condos that have 7 or fewer units. State law prevents us from requiring businesses or larger multifamily units from coming under a municipal contract for trash hauling. So that's why we're not talking about those things tonight. Okay. I'm hitting all my points, but I'm not following the notes anymore. So one thing I wanted to be really clear among us tonight is that there are only 2 decisions that have been made so far. One is the decision to adopt the goals and find solutions to achieve them. The other is to explore, investigate, pursue universal waste collection as one of these potential options. It's not the gold star solution that will solve all the problems and get us to 50% or 100%. And I know some of you want me to be able to quantify where it will get us, and we're working on that. All of this information that we're bringing together, we will present to City Council in a study session in April. It's currently scheduled, I think, for April 18th, and we're hoping to keep it that way because we don't want to move that around too much. I have to not say things about the City Council schedule. I'm going to get myself in trouble. But really, we're here to be talking about the options, and staff is working really hard researching and digesting and try to just understand the trade-offs so that we can help council understand the trade-offs in the different options of the decisions. Given the city and county of Broomfield's priorities of environmental stewardship and equity, we think it's just due diligence to explore this program. And that's why we're here tonight. And I'm really glad to be able to introduce Randy from EcoCycle. So if you don't know EcoCycle, they are a local, can you go back to that last slide though? Sorry. They're a local nonprofit and they have worked for decades and with many different communities along the Front Range who are pursuing the same question and are at different stages of implementing this kind of program. So we're lucky to have Randy's expertise. He is the Director of Policy and Community Partnerships for EcoCycle. And I do want you all to know that we are working with EcoCycle. They're helping us with outreach and education, and we're working with them to support the policy analysis process. They will have their own recommendations for Broomfield. They're not providing those tonight. That will be provided to council in April. Tonight, Randy's really talking generally about universal waste collection. So just keep that in mind. This is not a specific proposal for Broomfield. This is talking about what could be and what is in other places. It doesn't I've already said that already. A couple of things I want you to know while you're listening to Randy. One is that residents can opt out of this program. All of the programs Randy is going to talk about and one we would have in Broomfield, state law requires that residents can opt out of this contract if they so choose and contract another hauler to take care of their stuff. What other communities have found is that opt-out clause means participation rates can drop. That has an impact on the diversion impact, but also on haulers' ability to run efficient routes and get what they need to deliver bulk pricing. And so many communities have introduced a fee to opt out. So what we're saying and what you'll see hopefully in all of our messaging is that, yeah, residents will be able to opt out 100%, and they might have to pay a fee to do that. We don't know for sure, and we cannot say today what that fee would be. That would be further explored. The second thing is that implementation takes time, right? Even if we said tonight, which we couldn't because we don't have full council here, and this is, not a council meeting, not a hearing, but if we had a green light to go forward tonight, it would still be months, if not years, before this can happen. There's really a lot of moving parts. And most importantly, council's clearest direction to us has been that they care what you think about this. And so they want us to bring residents and other stakeholders like HOAs and haulers along step by step in the process. And so the next phase, when we move out of this swirly exploratory phase, is going to be more engagement, not so much of an outreach, but looking for opportunities to really get our heads around it together and figure out what makes the most sense for Broomfield. Randy, do you want to come up?
Thank you, Allison. And it's great to see you all here tonight. It's really an exciting time in Colorado to be talking about recycling and composting. There's a lot happening around the state, and I won't be getting into a lot of those things in my presentation, but feel free during the Q&A, we can talk more about what's happening at the state level and how that can better support your goals in Broomfield. So again, my name is Randy Moorman, and I am the Director of Policy and Community Campaigns at EcoCycle. It's great to be here with you this evening, and I'm first going to talk about who EcoCycle is. So you can go to the next slide. So EcoCycle brought recycling to Colorado in 1976, launching one of the first 20 curbside recycling programs in the US. And now over the past 40 years, we have grown into a thriving recycling business, employing over 65 people and managing an $8 million budget. And what makes us unique is that we have hands-on experience in every aspect of building a zero waste community. And what that means is we run the Boulder County Recycling Center. We're on contract there to run it for the county. And we haul recycling and composting. We provide zero waste education in schools. Many of Broomfield schools we are in actually doing education around zero waste. And we are in the community and at public events, as well as working with local and state governments to implement policies to make recycling and composting more convenient and accessible. And when it comes to recycling and composting, we have studied the best practices around the country and have published an annual report every year now since 2017 called the State of Recycling and Composting in Colorado. You can check that out on our website, ecocycle.org. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So I think it's important for us to first ground ourselves in what we're talking about when we say zero waste, because you heard Allison talk about the city and county of Broomfield zero waste goals. And so exactly what is this zero waste idea? Well, it's really rethinking how we do things, and it's cyclical instead of linear. So the status quo is very linear. It's materials are produced, they're consumed, and then they go to the landfill. And then we don't see them again because they get buried. Well, this redesigns our system so that the resources we use from product design to disposal prevent wasteful and polluting practices that lead to so much waste. And instead, it captures the discards and uses them again in a very cyclical nature. So instead of natural resources having to be mined and having to take lumber out of the forest, for example, to make new products, we are creating a much cleaner manufacturing process with far less pollution by using those materials again and again in our economy. And I want to, one last thing I want to say about zero waste, I think it's really important, is it's a goal. Similar to companies setting zero accident goals or the state setting zero highway deaths, it's a goal that helps us get better at what we're doing. It's not perfect and we're never going to be perfect, but it helps us get better. And so the city and county have, Broomfield have set a zero waste goal of 50% by 2050. And again, that was done back in 2020. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So what are the economic benefits of zero waste practices? Well, there's some significant ones that I want to touch on. And I think we've all heard a lot about supply chain issues of late, and they have hurt businesses across Colorado. They've spurred inflation that hurts consumers. And what happens when we look at a recycling system, a zero waste system that gets these materials back in our economy? We see that we build a more resilient domestic supply chain for those materials to get back into manufactured goods and packaging. And we don't have to depend on other countries for those materials. We have them right here and we are reusing them. One important stat for Colorado is that 95% of all the material we put in the landfill could be recycled or composted, 95%. And in 2021, Colorado landfilled 6 million tons of recyclable material, including jars, bottles, cans, and boxes. And all of these materials are things that international companies are wanting to use in their materials. And so are our local businesses here in Colorado. And they're facing difficulties in sourcing and getting those materials. But if we had instead put them in the landfill, we could be getting them back into those manufacturers' hands. And so annually in Colorado, we are literally burying over $100 million worth of material each year. And it's time that we turn that around. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation here in Broomfield to talk about how we can do that at the local level. Recycling contributes $8.7 billion to our economy each year, and it creates jobs. 9 times more jobs than landfilling material per ton. 9 times more than if we put it in the landfill. So it's an economic builder and it creates jobs here in the state. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And right here in Broomfield, we have a great example of this. We like to talk about closed loops, and that's what we get to a circular economy is by having a closed loop. And we have a great partner in that here in Broomfield called Glass to Glass Denver. It used to be called Momentum, and they got bought out by Glass to Glass Denver in just the past year or so. And because of Glass to Glass, we are able to capture glass and put it back into a bottle, back on the shelf in 6 weeks. And that's pretty amazing. And not a lot of states can say that they can do that, but we are able to do that here in Colorado. And what happens is that glass, when you put it in your bin, goes to a recycling facility like the Boulder County Recycling Center, gets separated out from all the other material. Then it goes to glass to get reprocessed. It gets cleaned. It gets sorted into different types of colors of glass. And then it goes to Rocky Mountain Bottle Company in Wheat Ridge, where it's made into those beer bottles. And it's quite amazing to see that process and get to visit and see those new beer bottles being made. So if you ever get the chance to take a tour of that, I highly encourage you to do so. It's one of the best kept secret tours in the state. but it takes just 6 weeks to get that back on the shelf. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's by the numbers what's happening here locally in Boulder County, which a lot of your material is going to the Boulder County Recycling Center. And we get lots of questions about whether or not what you're putting in your bin actually gets recycled. And the answer is yes. Definitely. Your materials get recycled, what you put in the bin, as long as they're on the guidelines. That's important. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But in Boulder County, we process 55,000 tons annually. And I know there's been a lot in the news for the past couple of years about China stopping the shipment of waste from the U.S. going to China. And then you hear about problems on the East Coast and the West Coast where municipalities are having to landfill the recyclable materials because they have no place to send it. Well, that didn't happen in Colorado. And the reason is because we're a landlocked state. So it doesn't make sense economically for us to ship that to a port and then ship it to another country. And so we have always in Colorado have had to find ways to ship to other parts of the country or here in the state to get our materials recycled. And we do that quite well. But we, of course, could always have room for improvement. And I want to also point out that to this question of if your material is getting recycled or not, there's a cost to hauling material, whether it goes to the landfill or whether it goes to the recycling plant. And so the haulers are going to collect that material that can be recycled, and they're going to want to get it recycled because they can sell that material. Like I said, it goes to these manufacturers who want that material. So they're going to want to get it to the recycling plant and not get it to the landfill. So that's one of their goals. And I would say that what isn't getting recycled that ends up in our stream is what we call contaminants, things that don't belong there. And our common contaminants that we see are plastic bags. Those are a big, big no-no. They get caught in our machines, and we have to stop our plant 3 times a day to get those plastic bags out of our conveyor belts. So keep those out of your single stream recycling. And then we see a lot of food contamination. And that's really hard on us because you can imagine if you've got a full jar of spaghetti sauce and it gets spilled on paper, that paper can no longer be recycled. So we've got a problem with food contamination as well. So we want to now, when I talk about this, I have people ask me, well, do I have to run my recyclables through the dishwasher? Absolutely not. Don't do that. Don't do that. But rinse it out and make sure it's empty. That's all you have to do. We just don't want a full jar of spaghetti sauce. Make sense? But if it's got a little bit of spaghetti sauce in it, it's fine. We can handle that. So what isn't getting recycled is the contaminants. And in Boulder County, I'm proud to say that at our plant, we only see a contamination of 11 to 12%. And that's because we have a strong culture of education and people understand this is recyclable and this is not. And they follow the guidelines very well. And that's not to say that's the same in all of Colorado or the rest of the country. But when you invest in that education along with your recycling program, you get very low contamination. And so that speaks volumes for that educational component that's really important. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So there's also huge environmental benefits for doing this. I talked about the economic ones, and I want to talk about the environmental ones, and that is including greenhouse gas savings. So in our state, and I'm going to talk more about this on another slide, but we're only recycling 16%, recycling and composting 16% of our waste. But even with that alone, we are reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by the equivalent of taking 400,000 cars off the road a year by just what we're doing now in the state with recycling and composting. Now imagine we've got a low rate, and if we just double that, we'd be taking 800,000 cars off the road. So it's not that small of a task to have a huge impact on our climate. And it's, it's something that everyone can do. That's the thing. Not everyone can afford an electric car. I haven't bought one yet because I'm saving up money for it. It costs a lot of money. And not everyone can put solar panels on their house, but you can set up a system as a community that everyone can participate in recycling. Everyone can participate in composting, and that's going to take a huge dent out of your carbon emissions as a community today. You don't have to wait until that new solar field gets built because that's years down the road. But if everyone recycled today, you could have a huge, take a bite out of your carbon footprint today. So that's what's really exciting about recycling and composting, something we can all do now. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I also want to talk about the importance of why we recycle and compost is to keep materials out of the landfill, and that protects our water And it also saves us taxpayer money. Keeping organic material, especially like food scraps, yard trimmings out of the landfill is so important to, again, fighting climate change, because when that goes to the landfill and what they do is they cap that cell every day and try to keep out water and air, well, then that material decomposes without oxygen. And when that happens, it creates methane gas, one of the most powerful greenhouse gases we have. So if we can stop that cold by just not sending it to the landfill anymore. It's pretty easy and simple if we all did that. Landfills pollute our air and water by turning into toxic messes, leaching pollutants into waterways. And so taxpayers are still paying today for the cleanup of the nearby Marshall landfill, and we're going to be paying in perpetuity for that happening. And so we can really reduce our costs as taxpayers to our landfills, because as they get filled, guess what? We as taxpayers have to build new landfills, and that comes as a huge cost. So recycling and composting can really take a bite out of those costs that the community has to face around landfills. Next slide, please. So here are the numbers. There's a lot on here. I'm going to walk you through a little bit. So I already mentioned Colorado isn't doing so great. 16% recycling and composting rate. Nationally, it's twice that, 32%. Now, these smaller graphs are important. That our aluminum cans, we're only recycling 14% of the aluminum cans we have in Colorado. And I'm going to get back to aluminum because that's really important material I want to talk about. Glass. I mentioned about what's happening in Broomfield right here in our community with glass. We're only recycling 12% of our glass. And what happens is that at the Rocky Mountain Bottle Company, they have to raise their furnaces up to 1,700 degrees to make glass from raw materials like sand, soda, ash, and limestone. But when you bring in recycled glass, they can drop that furnace. That reduces their energy costs, and that saves them money. So more recycled glass we can get means we could probably lower our cost of beer in Colorado because we won't have to pay so much for that glass. Cheaper beer. So they're not getting enough glass. They actually have to import glass from out of state. But we have tons of it here, but it's just going to the landfill. So that's a huge problem. And we're also only composting 6% of our food and yard waste. And our soils are so nutrient poor. If you're a gardener, you know that. And applying compost really enriches that soil. It increases moisture content, which really makes them much stronger and more resilient against droughts. And that's important, of course, here in Colorado. Next slide. So I said I was going to talk about aluminum. The most common item we can think of recycling is aluminum, the aluminum can. It can be recycled indefinitely. It never breaks down to a point where it cannot be recycled. And recycling aluminum takes 95% less energy than making cans out of virgin bauxite ore. And yet Coloradans only recycle 14% of our cans. And it's, if you have a recycle bin, it's so easy just to put it in the recycle bin. So that's something that we want to make sure that access and convenience is there and available for everyone. By increasing our recycling of cans to 90%, which is actually something that many other communities have done, so it's not impossible, we would create 2,000 jobs in Colorado, and we would save enough energy to power 28,000 homes. Now, I learned an interesting stat. That's about how many homes are in Broomfield. So we could power all of your homes if we were able to increase our recycling by 90%. All right, next slide, please. So how does Broomfield compare to other communities in the Front Range? And we're really here today because Broomfield wants to explore ways to continue to improve your city's recycling and composting. Well, it was already mentioned in Broomfield, you're recycling 22%, you're recycling and composting 22% of your discards. And that's according to 2021 data that was reported by haulers. Again, the national average was 32%. So one of the things that we're finding in other communities, and we have yet to really dig into what's happening in Broomfield specifically, we're collecting data now from your surveys and other sources. But what we are finding is that communities with lower recycling rates, there's a lack of convenience for residents who want to do the right thing. But if you don't live in an HOA, you have to go a lot of extra miles to get recycling service, and you have to pay more for it than your HOA neighbors. So that's why we're looking at this and wanting to explore this. It's really an equity thing. How can we get equal access to everyone for recycling and composting. And we know from other cities that in an open market hauling system, which is what you currently have, residents who want to recycle often have to pay more than those who throw all of their material in the trash. And non-HOA residents have to go out of their way to find a hauler that offers recycling and then add it to their waste system. Many communities are doing better, as you can see up here. And Broomfield is already a leader. I do want to point that out. And I think that's important. You're better than the state average, and you're better than a number of other communities. And I think the reason is because many Broomfield residents care. They're already recycling either through their HOA contracts or subscribing and paying more for recycling services. But it'll be interesting to find out who is not recycling, who is not composting, who has these cost barriers, and how we can better address that. So the opportunity with universal waste collection is that residents who want to recycle and don't already benefit from group purchasing, which is what's happening in the HOA, discounts, they get discounts by group purchasing. And if you're not an HOA, you don't have access to that opportunity. So how do we get you the same access to that services? And so universal waste collection gets you that same access to those that benefit of group purchasing. And hopefully lowering your costs and getting you more service. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So there's a lot on here. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the key points on this. This is what the leaders, so in the previous slide, you saw all the other communities that are recycling much higher rates. Longmont, Loveland has been the leader for the past 6 years. I think they're at 58% right now. Oh, it's up there. Yes, 58%. And so if you look at these leaders, most of them, not all of them, but most of them either are municipally run or they have a contract, which is what universal waste hauling is. And so they're doing really well. And I will call out Boulder because I know that gets called out a lot. And maybe sometimes in Broomfield, you look at Boulder and you go, what are they doing? So what's happening in Boulder is very unique, and we don't see this in a lot of communities, and I'll tell you why. But in Boulder, they have an open market system, but they have an ordinance that requires haulers to provide recycling, compost, and trash to each home and bundle that in as a service. Now, that raises costs. And I'm going to talk about why that raises costs, because you still have this open market. You have many trucks servicing one neighborhood. And so that's going to increase your costs if you go that route. So I would caution you to think that Boulder is the gold standard, because it's not. But the other communities up there, you'll see, are either municipal or universal waste collection with that contract. And then they get a lot of them, most of them have added in some sort of composting program. And that really helps drive up their diversion rates or increase their recycling and composting rates overall. All right, next slide, please. So nationally, what's happening is that most of the US is under this system. 70% of US cities have universal collection of some form. And there's a key reason for this, because it's efficient to have one truck go down your street for trash, one truck go down your street for recycling. And then if you have compost, you have another truck that goes and get your compost. When you have an open market system, you could have 10, 12, 13 trucks going down your street. And so because of this efficiency, it really helps then provide that equity that we were talking about, where everyone has access to recycling and many to compost, and everyone in the city pays the same price for the same services. So because of this increased access, these cities collect 100 pounds more of recycling per household per year than those that don't have universal waste collection. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So why are communities making the change to universal waste collection? And I will start by saying, and I think this is the thing that many communities look at, is that truck traffic. It reduces truck traffic and therefore it decreases road damage. And that's going to save a lot of taxpayer money. And I've got some stats for that coming up in another slide. It lowers costs and increases equity, especially between HOA and non-HOA residents. It allows cities to expand their services to add composting programs and expand popular services and make sure that they continue to grow, like Broomfield's spring cleanup. And I've already shown how it can increase recycling and composting rates and increase convenience. It makes it easier to get service and pay for that service. go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's talk about trucks. One big way to switching to a universal waste collection system is that it saves taxpayer money by reducing the number of trucks on your local streets. Trash trucks are one of the heaviest vehicles on your local streets, way more than delivery trucks, way more. And each trash truck is equivalent to 1,000 to 1,400 vehicles per day in terms of road damage. Fort Collins has done some really amazing recent studies on this because they're going through the same conversation you are right now. They're a little more advanced. They've gone further down the road, but they've had the same conversations and they've done some really great research where they have found that 20% of road damage was caused by trash trucks alone. And they are looking at changing to a universal waste collection. And in that analysis, they determined that the city would save taxpayers money $600,000 a year. So in comparison, I think some estimates I got for the city and county of Broomfield, that would pay for about 3 years of spring cleanups, to put that in perspective. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So why does universal waste collection provide more service at a lower cost? Well, it has to do with economies of scale. The cost of the truck and driver is the same for the hauler, whether they pick up from one home or from every home on the block. So let's just assume, to simplify this, that it costs $10 per minute per truck to collect trash. The most expensive inefficiency for the hauler is the driving time to the community and then from the community to the landfill or to the recycling center. In other words, it costs dollars to get a truck to you, to the customer, and pennies to serve each of you in the community. And so the way to lower costs for the hauler and the resident is to increase density. And it's all about density. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So I tried to graphically show how this might look on a street with about 7 homes. And so under an open market system, you could have a hauler that's let's say collecting from 5 homes out of the 7. Well, as I said, it costs the same to them if they collect 5 homes or if they collect all 7 homes. So let's say for now, it's going to cost $70 to go down that street and collect from those homes. But with only 5 homes, it's going to cost each home $14. But if the hauler collected from all 7 homes, it would cost each home $10. So that's how you see that economy of scale works. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to talk more about a little bit about open markets because I know everyone believes in competition and how important that is. And so I want to say, first of all, that let's really analyze what's happening in an open market. And it actually tends to have flawed and inequitable pricing. And so let me talk what I mean by that. Because we do hear that some residents like to have choice, and that's important in their hauler, and like to have competition for the service that they're getting, and think that competition really helps lower their rates. Well, the problem is that in an open market system, it does not truly function as an open competitive market for the residents or consumers because costs are not transparent. I'll just say that again. That's really important. Costs are not transparent. It's not like going to Walmart and looking at a product and saying, oh, it costs this much, and going to Target and seeing that it costs this much. There's no place for you to go to see what all the pricing, how much it costs to get a hauler to come from different service providers to your home and compare prices. And what we've actually found, and again, Fort Collins just did a pricing study that was very interesting that showed this, is you actually have individuals paying more than their neighbor from the same hauler for the same service. And that's actually what Fort Collins found, that they actually had some homes were paying $6 more than their neighbor per month for the same price. And where HOAs actually right now have a big advantage. They can use group purchasing to get a lower rate. And we see that time and time again in each community that we work with in Colorado that has an open market system is the HOAs just have a way better deal. And that's because they can do that group pricing. For example, in Arvada recently, before switching to a universal waste collection system, HOA homes were paying between $8 and $15 a month, and non-HOA homes were paying between $20 and $29 a month. So universal waste collection creates equity in service and pricing and makes sure everyone gets the benefits of that group purchasing. And what happens is it is very competitive because the city puts out a request for a proposal. There are contract bids that come in from haulers. It's very transparent and they compete against each other to get the best bid in the city. It's fair, competitive, and transparent. And then the city, after having that contract, they have very strict requirements in the contract that the hauler has to meet. If they don't meet it, they renegotiate the contract or they say, you know what, we're going to put it out for bid, but it's time to compete again because you're not meeting our needs. So it is a very competitive and transparent process. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The one last thing that I want to say that is very useful to also consider when you're thinking about universal waste hauling is that you can expand additional services, add on new services. Cities often have difficulty finding haulers to come in just for a one-off. Like, hey, we're going to have a big bulky item cleanup day and we're going to put stuff out in our curb. Will you bring your trucks in to pick up from the curb? Haulers, that's a huge cost to them because they have to stop what they're doing in one city, take the trucks from that city to come to your city to pick that up. And now more and more haulers are just not doing it. They're refusing to do those small one-offs because it's too much of a cost to them to pay for their drivers and their trucks to go and do that. But what we find is in these universal waste hauling collection systems, those can be added into the contract. So you have a hauler who's going to be providing that daily service to pick up from your home. Then they're also going to provide that service to pick up that bulky item from your home when that collection happens. So there's a huge advantage in including that in your contract. And again, it's that economy of scale. You've got a huge contract, you add that in, it would come in at a much lower cost than if it was that one-off that you had to go find a hauler just for that day to pay for that service. And so we're talking about options like curbside yard waste collection could be considered and included in the contract. Curbside compost collection, which I know there's a lot of conversation about. Expanding your spring cleanup. You could have it instead of just once or twice a year, you could have it, 4 or 5 times throughout the season. So there's lots of different options or several times during a month even that other communities have done and to consider. Let's go ahead and go to my last slide. So it's really seen as a best practice around the country. And as I said, 70% of US cities already have it. And it's really what we're seeing more and more is Colorado cities are starting to do this more and more, and we're seeing that number grow as well. And I'll note that in our survey in Arvada in 2022, the community survey showed 63% of residents after 1 year of the program getting up and running rate it as good or fair. And so we are seeing that. And even in other parts of the country, we have never seen a community go back to open market after they switch to universal waste collection. And we see a growth in the approval rating of that program throughout those communities. So with that, I'll go ahead and finish and thank you for the time. And I know we're going to take questions as part of the panel, correct? Great.
We're going to hear from our ACES members, and while we get the video queued up, this is your chance to write on your cards. If you haven't, we're going to collect them after we hear from our advisory committee for environmental sustainability. If you need a card, put your hand up and somebody will get you. Okay. And we also have pens, so if you need a pen, Kat, there's some behind you. Okay. Do we have the video?
Hi everyone, I couldn't make it to the forum tonight, but I still want to take a moment to share my thoughts. My name is Kavya, I'm a senior in high school at Broomfield High. As a member of ACES, I've had the privilege of seeing a lot of the behind-the-scenes work that has gone into creating this program and molding it into the best proposal possible for residents. As someone who doesn't pay for my family's trash collection, I can't speak to the excitement of having greater purchasing power and arguing for lower rates. As someone who has no children and owns no car, I can't say that I'll feel safer knowing that there will be fewer big trucks around to serve as a danger to my toddler, or that I'm glad the roads will be in better shape with my car. But as a lifelong resident of Broomfield, I do know that the benefits of this program will improve the lives of many in our community. Adoption of the Universal Waste Collection Program improves access to recycling and would lay the foundation for future progress, future projects and progress that would help us increase our overall waste diversion rates. As a teenager today, it can often feel like the world is going to end. My social media feed is filled with constant stories of natural and humanitarian disasters. My environmental science class is overrun by increasingly cynical documentaries. It's hard to feel like one person can make an impact. But programs like this make it clear that there are tangible steps we can take towards a sustainable future. This is one of many first steps. Some of those steps will be difficult. This step is not. For my future and yours, please join me in participating in the survey and expressing your support for universal waste collection. Thank you.
We have two youth representatives on the ACES committee, Kavya and Sophia, and we have remarks from Sophia in a moment that her mom is going to read. But first, Agustina.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Agustina Fox Collis. I'm a Broomfield resident who deeply cares about this topic. So I thank you for this forum today, for taking the time to educate us and help answer questions about a more streamlined and beneficial waste collection system. I'm also a member of ACES, the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, and I'm on the board of the nonprofit Sustainable Broomfield. This topic was one of the initial drivers that brought me to join ACES. Almost 3 years ago, my family and I, my husband and my 2 kids, bought a house in Lacamora neighborhood. I almost immediately noticed that none of my neighbors had the same trash days as I did. Every day of the week, we had at least 2 garbage trucks from different providers driving up and down our quiet little street, picking up trash or recycling. And our particular street has 6 providers, in case you were wondering. And we also have different rates. This traffic is a continuous disturbance in our neighborhood. And what's more important is this practice is having a huge impact on the sustainability of our city, as we heard today from Randy and Allison. Efficient waste management practices greatly impact our diversion rates, which we learned a lot about today. And they're really crucial to reaching our zero waste goals. So we know that every city must do their part to reduce their impacts on our resources and in order to avoid some horrible effects of our new climate reality. Personally, I fear for my kids and our younger generations. You heard from our youngest members at ACES, but the levels of pollution and potentials for natural disasters are really leaving behind a horrible world for them. As a Sustainable Broomfield member, I'm out speaking to the community members quite often. We join in a lot of community events, and residents are eager to participate and really educate their families on proper recycling and composting practices. When we explain that recycling can extend the life from depleted resources and that composting can add vital nutrients back into our soil and how important these habits are to our future, they're really shocked and very much willing to do their part. They have also shown support for to be more transparent with waste collection systems, and just to have better rates overall for residents, a little bit of the inequity that we were talking about with HOA neighborhoods versus non-HOA. A note on composting. So for the last 2 years, Sustainable Broomfield has operated a very successful composting program where participants can fill up 5-gallon buckets with their kitchen waste and add it to compost bins at the Grange Community Garden. So we have composted around 5,500 gallons of waste and are nearing max capacity in our club. We run a really small operation, but we know that more residents are looking for composting options, and they would really support this universal collection effort. So in closing, I think that this is a very exciting time for our community. Broomfield is a really beautiful city. And I thank you for continuing to adopt these practices that can help keep our city that way. Thank you.
I'm looking for Yolanda.
Hello, my name's Yolanda Del Toro, and I'm here reading on behalf of my daughter, Sophia Pitch, who's an ACES member. She wishes she could be here, and this is what she wants me to tell you. I'm here, and she wishes she could tell you to give this testimony in person because she deeply cares about this policy. And she is more than amazed at all the work that's being put into implementing a successful universal collection system that's fair and equitable for everyone, HOA and non-HOA residents. Broomfield is committed to exploring ways to craft a universal collection system that centralizes around sustainability and ease of access for all Broomfield residents. There have been drafts, after drafts, proposals and meetings, and so many careful discussions that have gone into making this case and possible and successful. They care a lot. The employees of Broomfield and ACES really do care a lot about this. Broomfield is expanding at a rapid pace, and so is our trash. Universal collection by a single hauler is one of the most feasible tools to increase waste diversion and increasing recycling efforts in our community. Under a single hauler and a scale of operation the size of Broomfield, combined with the positive environmental and community impact, this is something worth investing our time, energy, and efforts to do successfully. I know Broomfield strives to be equitable and sustainable as possible, and by working together to hear all of the voices and the concerns and ideas, we can achieve our goals and move forward together. Please consider universal collection with the next generation of residents, our environment, and your community as a whole in mind. And thank you for your time.
Okay, we have one more former ACES member we're going to hear from. So get your questions written down. We're going to collect those cards in just a minute.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Darla Ahrens, and I'm a resident of Broomfield. And I am the former chair of the ACES committee. And during my 3-year tenure as an ACES member, I founded and championed the Zero Waste Subcommittee, which brought forward the Zero Waste Resolution to City Council that was passed in February of 2020. And thereafter also included the Zero Waste Action Plan. So you can either thank me for that or not, but that was me. The development of the Zero Waste Plan was a multi-stakeholder process. We consulted with experts, local businesses, residents, and the number one priority that rose to the top of the recommendations in the Zero Waste Plan is to adopt universal waste hauling. This action will provide equal and expanded access to waste disposal services, reduce road impacts and traffic, lower noise and air pollution, and improve safety in our neighborhoods. Waste reduction and resource conservation are not new goals for Broomfield. Broomfield has been working on this for well over a decade. These intentions are set forth in the 2011 Sustainability Plan, in the 2016 Comprehensive Plan, and the most recent Zero Waste Plan. The leadership in Broomfield has taken action to establish goals. The residents of Broomfield have spoken through surveys and community engagement events that this is what they want. They want curbside recycling and curbside composting. They want fewer trash trucks on their streets. They want equitable and affordable services in our community. So in order to meet our goals, Broomfield needs to take bold actions now to increase recycling and composting rates. And it starts with changing how we provide trash services. A proven solution is for Broomfield to implement a universal waste services program. The new system would charge, households for trash service and include the weekly recycling and composting, and the rates would be based upon the size of your trash container. The universal waste hauling model creates a more fair and equitable pricing system that residents directly have a financial incentive from to recycle and compost more. It removes that economic barrier that currently prevents a lot of Broomfield residents from recycling and composting. City and County of Broomfield residents are currently diverting 22%, as Randy pointed out, of our resources from the landfill. But one of the reasons for this is, aside from the economic barrier that I just mentioned, is that most residents don't even have access to recycling and composting services. One of the easiest ways to provide this is to bundle recycling, trash, and compost services together in a universal waste hauling program. So residents automatically receive all of the services at their homes. It's time for Broomfield to join over 20 of our Colorado municipal neighbors in providing automatic curbside recycling and composting services. There's real data that proves universal waste hauling and pay as you throw are successful in improving landfill diversion rates. They also decrease greenhouse gas emissions and create a more resilient and safer street system for our community. Through the implementation of the highest priority identified in the Zero Waste Action Plan, universal hauling, all residents, regardless of income or their living situation, will have access to programs and services identified in the plan. And costs will not fall disproportionately on underserved populations. Zero waste embodies the values of environmental protection and social justice. By implementing these strategies, Broomfield will help to bring the systemic changes that are needed to ensure a healthy and vibrant future for all. Thank you for being here tonight, for learning, for asking questions, and being open to a dialogue. I'm happy to answer any questions later during our panel. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask the panelists to come take a seat. And while they do that, can you pass your question cards to the aisle? Even if you didn't write anything down, go ahead and pass it and we'll use it at another event and we'll make sure it gets reused. We may not recycle the questions for other events. I don't think our colleagues would appreciate that. Wait, Kat. Okay, got it. I see you already started. You already passed things along. Excellent at following directions. Okay. You've already met some of our esteemed panelists. Randy, you got to hear from EcoCycle, and Darla, who is not only a Broomfield resident and former ACES chair, but now works at the state. My mouth is going to stop working. Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and Darla is a state leader in helping get established the state program that's going to extend free recycling services. It's called the Producer Responsibility, or EPR, and she might say more about that if we get a question to that effect. And we have Garrett McDaniel, who is our Sustainability Manager here for the City and County of Broomfield, and Garrett has worked really hard on this project so far and helping us figure out what's what and what we can say and where we should be heading. So we're glad Garrett's here to help answer questions. And then down in the end, we have Ken Rutt, who is our Director of Public Works. And our Public Works team, they also work really hard on expanding options for our residents and keeping the recycling center going and figuring out how to keep the spring cleanup going, because we know that our residents love that. And as Randy mentioned, it's getting trickier and trickier with the haulers. So that's enough from me. And I left my glasses under my chair. Augustina, would you mind handing those to me? Thank you. Okay. The first question is going to be for Garrett. And just a reminder, panelists, if you can hold the mic up to you. This is a frequent flyer question. We're getting it at the tabling events and Broomfield Voice and by email. So we wanted to make sure to ask it so it gets answered publicly for everybody. Can you tell us more about the prices that are listed on the websites? Because we're hearing from a lot of people that they pay less than that.
Yeah, so we went, and sorry for the mask. I've been sick the last couple of weeks thanks to my 2 young daughters. Yeah, so we went back and forth on whether or not to include some example prices. It's caused some confusion, but what's on the Broomfield Voice page is an average price for services in Lafayette, Louisville, and Golden. In those communities, they have trash, recycling, and composting. I think we'll end up talking about composting as well. Composting does add costs. So when you're looking at that, you know that you're getting all 3 services. Also in those prices is volume-based pricing. So when municipalities implement these universal collection systems, they implement a cost adder so that you're incentivizing folks to use the recycling and composting bins so that they can subscribe to a smaller trash cart. Oftentimes, what we've seen from other municipalities is that a small trash container, say it's $10, it'll be 100% cost adder. So that medium-sized bin would be $20 and the large size bin would be $30. So the point of the program is to incentivize folks to subscribe to the smallest trash bin possible so that they can, so that they use the recycling and composting. And so we're keeping that material out of the landfill. Yeah, I think that sort of explains it.
Can I just add one quick thing to that? On the pricing and the fact that those prices are curbside service for trash recycling and compost. And you're right that you're going to see a higher price because of the compost being added. You're going to have a lower price if you do trash and recycling alone. And I know that there's great interest in organics and collection of that, and that's great. But what I do want to say is there's other options out there that you could actually have a lower price if you didn't have weekly or bi-weekly curbside compost collection. You could have a seasonal yard waste collection, for example. You could have a drop-off for food waste. There's other things that can be done to also lower that compost cost.
Thank you. There's a question here about which of the residential haulers are most supportive of a single hauler agreement and which haven't responded or communicated with Broomfield. It's a great question that I'm going to take because I was just thinking about this today. We haven't had conversations yet with the haulers. There were conversations with all our licensed haulers when the zero waste plan was put together. And at that time, they were able to speak with 5, and 3 of them supported a single hauler approach. 2 of them supported a districting approach where instead of doing the whole city all at once, you break into smaller regions, and 1 hauler was opposed at that time. I'd have to look back. I don't know which one is which, but in any case, our plan is to reach back out to the haulers and pick up the conversation again, because a lot's changed in the last year or so, and we don't want to assume their position would be the same. Okay. Sorry. Universal collection may look more efficient. Evidence shows the opposite, since my bill would increase 75% for trash pickup. I easily recycle since I drop off my items when I drive by the recycle center. Universal collection would force me to pay for recycling in addition to paying 75% more for trash removal. This is inequitable. Randy, is there anything you want to say about that?
So I know it wasn't phrased as a question, it was a comment, but I'd be happy to respond. So what we find in other cities and that have programs like this is that the cost of adding recycling to your bill, if you're not in a contract citywide program is going to be more than if you were in a citywide program. And that again goes back to that economy of scale. Now, the example was given of someone who doesn't have recycling as part of their service, and so they're going to drop off, for example. And so they're worried that their price is going to increase because now recycling is going to be delivered to their home. And there's the potential for that to happen. But again, I would say that it's not a dramatic jump because of that economy scale for including that recycling cost. If you were just comparing, someone who's not in a citywide program or not in an HOA that has to add the cost of recycling onto their bill, is going to be way more than it would be if they went with a contract program either through an HOA or the city.
Thank you. There are two related questions here. And if you see me shuffling, I'm trying to go back and forth about who might be answering them. But this one asks, what % of homes in Broomfield are covered by HOA agreements? And that was something I was supposed to cover in my talking points. So I'm sorry about that. I'm going to pitch this to you, Garrett. Also, if we saw a map of Broomfield with the exclusion areas, HOAs, apartment complexes, commercial establishments, so what's left? Like, what are we talking about if we're excluding all those things?
Yeah. So what we've found is 60% of residential parcels are within an HOA. And I would have to go back and look at the data, but upwards to 85 to 90% of those HOAs already have a universal collection contract. So if we're excluding HOAs, we're looking at upwards of greater than 40%. And potentially, HOAs could join if they want to, or if they don't already have a universal collection contract. All of these things are, we're still sort of discussing them. Nothing's been written in stone.
Thanks, Garrett. This is a question I think Ken is best to answer. What would the bid process look like? What does the selection process look like? And maybe you could walk us through generally how we handle things like this in the city and county.
Sure. Am I on? I can't tell. Basically what we do on a lot of our major contracts is can be a two-step process where the first phase is to go out and see who are the qualified contractors that can handle the multiple functions of this program. So we would go out and put that onto BidNet and have those various contractors submit their qualifications, that they have the equipment, the staffing, the necessary financial backing to be able to complete the contract. Once we've established which ones those are, then we would go back out for a competitive bid and solicit bids from those qualified contractors. That's typically how we do some of our larger contracts.
Thank you. Waste management offers a military discount. Would this be included in this proposal? What about disabled type pickup? For example, the hauler brings the bin down to the street and back for pickup instead of me taking it to the curb. Great questions. At this stage, we don't know exactly what's going to be included. We haven't gotten into those conversations, but ensuring that there is equitable access for residents to make sure you have access to the services you need. And if that kind of pickup from the door is important for you, that we will explore ways to make that happen. That equitable access is a city and county priority. In terms of discounts, this is a question for us. Like the same way that standardized pricing increases transparency and equity, also it has some equity trade-offs. It affects people differently. And there are definitely residents who are concerned about what that's going to mean for their, what's the financial impact is going to be on them. We do know there are options and there are subsidies and there's grants and there's ways that the fee structure can be amended. We can't say much about it yet since we haven't had the conversation with the haulers and we haven't had the bidding process. But again, making sure that the pricing structure of the program is equitable would be a top concern for us.
Can I just jump in really quick too on that? And this relates to the earlier question about pricing and the impact that can have on depending on what kind of current program you have. I think one thing that I think is hugely beneficial, and we haven't really talked about it a lot, but you have greater choice when you have a system like this, because you may have a couple that are living on a fixed income and they don't produce a lot of trash, yet under the current open market system, you have a contract with a hauler where you get one size trash can, you pay the same as everybody else. And it doesn't depend on how much trash you're producing. But under this kind of system, you could actually see you be paying less because you opt for the smaller trash can. And so it's very similar to your electricity and your water. You pay for what you use. And so you could actually see that you end up paying less than you were before because you have that choice to have that smaller trash can.
Thanks, Randy. There are two questions here that I think might be good for Darla to answer. One is, won't the preferred contract route pave the way for one big trash hauler to take over? What happens to the little guys? And the other question is, we've heard that there's going to be free recycling available in 2026. So why do this now?
Oh, she's throwing it back to me. Repeat the first one, please.
This question is, if we contract a single hauler for this program, doesn't it pave the way for the?
Oh, like a monopoly.
Yes.
Yes, we hear this a lot. No. And the thing is, as and we've seen a lot of cities are getting really smart at writing their RFPs, request for proposals, where you put in options where you could do districts, for example, so you could have multiple haulers. You could even have smaller haulers be able to be subcontractors to larger haulers, so they could come in and do the, just the recycling route for this one area. So you don't, you can create an RFP that at least allows the smaller haulers to participate. And so you can be really creative and innovative in how you create that. And we've seen cities do that.
Thank you. And Darla, why do this now?
Sure, that's a great question. So the Producer Responsibility Program for statewide recycling, which was House Bill 22-1355 that just passed in 2022, will provide free recycling for all residents of Colorado starting in 2026. The benefit of Broomfield moving forward right now with implementing a universal waste hauling system is that they will then be queued up to immediately experience the benefits of the Producer Responsibility Program. As Ken mentioned, there's quite a lengthy procurement process. If this policy is adopted, it could take anywhere from 6 months to a year in my 18 years of government service. That's just for the procurement. And then you've got another year of equipment and infrastructure implementation. So that's 2 years of building the program and getting the infrastructure in place. In the meantime, Broomfield could be collecting all of the data, getting actual, more updated facts based on tonnages and expenses associated with the service, so that when 2026 rolls around, they just hand the bill to the state and say, here you go. And then they're ready to go, versus waiting. And then if they waited until 2026, then in 2026, you have to start your procurement process. Then you have to go through all the infrastructure investment and time. And then you don't have recycling and composting until 2028 or 9. So.
And I'll just add too, that by doing it now, you as a city or a city and county of Broomfield have more control and more say over what that program is going to look like. Because if you don't have a universal waste collection in 2026, the state producer responsibility organization, those brand names that are paying into that, will decide for you. They'll come in and say, you're going to have this hauler and this service. And you've opted out of having that choice to determine who that is. And it could mean more trucks on your road, because they could bring in somebody that's not already in your community. They could decide to contract with somebody else to provide recycling. So really, by doing it now, you have a big say in what that looks like.
Is a municipal vote required to approve universal hauler? So there are many pathways. A ballot question is just one of them. And staff are working on researching the pros and cons of other options, which would include ordinances and resolutions. And a contract the size of a single hauler, a universal program wouldn't happen through the city and county without endorsement and hearings from council. So it's a council directed decision. It's not something staff would just decide to do. Okay, I think we have time for one more. How long did the process take in Lafayette, Louisville, and Golden from the initiation of exploration discussions until execution of the initiatives? And to that end, if such an initiative is agreed upon, when is the earliest you would expect it to occur? I'm going to answer that last part. We really don't know. It's very hard to say right now with supply chain shortages and like haulers, if they need to get extra trucks to provide the contract, we don't want to put ourselves in a corner of saying the earliest it would occur. It's very unlikely to be this year. We know that much. And Garrett, do you want to say something about what's happened, how long it's taken in other places?
It's hard for me to say. Each community has their own experience from my conversations with my colleagues in other municipalities. Golden implemented theirs in 2008, and they're continuously improving their program. So that's been over 10 years, and they're continuing to add services to their program. So it's hard for us to say right now, but as we've talked about the procurement process, we've talked about engaging with HOAs, with haulers, engagement with council. We're at the beginning of this road. And so it's hard for me to say we'll have this implemented in 18 months because we just don't have all the information at this time.
Thank you. Okay, there's time for 2 more questions. And again, we will answer these and we'll get them answered on the website, not just the ones we've covered already, but the ones that haven't been covered. All of the questions and all of the answers that we can provide. Some of the answers may be, we don't know this yet, give us some time. How will residents be billed for the Universal Collection Program? That's a great question, and it's one we don't have the answer to tonight. We're getting comfortable with saying we don't know yet. Please be patient with us. There are different options, and we know that some other communities include this in their regular utility billing, and in some contracts the haulers do it, and there are pros and cons of both approaches, and we're trying to understand the impact on the city and county organization of handling the billing ourselves. We were told that taxpayer dollars would be saved in so many ways. Can you name a city that has implemented this program and the tax reduction for the taxpayer? I'm looking at you.
So as you said, there's a lot of cities that have done this for quite a while. And so I think that would, we'd have to go back to actually get hard numbers. What I reported on is what those cities report to us when we ask for, information like that. So we can certainly dig that deeper and get like hard numbers. But we'd want to look to communities that have had this for a good long while to find, when you look at, for example, the savings you get from decreased road damage, cities have a huge investment in their streets and roads, and so that's something that you can look at that kind of data over time. So I'd want to go back and look at some cities like Golden, for example, that have done this for quite a while.
All right. Sign language happening.
Thank you, Allison. And I just want to take a moment and thank all of our panelists for taking the time to be here this evening and for all of your answers and the prep work in advance of tonight. As Abby mentioned when she kicked us off earlier, this is just the beginning of the conversation. So I know I learned a lot tonight, and we've been studying and researching this for the past 4 months now in depth. And it's just part of the journey. So thank you for being here. There were a lot of questions we did not get to tonight. So as Allison mentioned, we will be posting those on the Broomfield Voice page, and give us a little bit of grace. It will take us a while to get through all of them, but we will answer them and get them posted. And again, the journey continues. So up here on the page, you'll see the Broomfield Voice website. When you're exiting tonight, you'll also see there's handouts on the table. Those handouts have QR QR codes on them or the URL. If you log in, that Broomfield Voice page is your one-stop shop. We keep it updated of where we're going, what we're doing, future HOA meetings, all the things that Allison mentioned that will come in phase 2 with community outreach. That's the best way to know what's going on. So stay tuned in there. All of your questions will be there. And then there's a survey that we've talked about. So maybe many of you have already completed that survey. If you haven't, again, what we heard from council when we presented back in July was they want to hear from the residents. We want to hear all of it because that's how we'll make the best decision for the path forward. So if you haven't completed that survey, I encourage you to do that. We actually have a laptop out in the lobby tonight. If you want to complete it tonight, we're happy to hang around and help you complete that. Or you can do it at home in the comfort of your home as well. And with that, I just want to say thank you again for joining us and to my team for all the work that they did to get here tonight and to all of you for being part of this conversation. So more to come. And again, we will be presenting at the April 18th study session to council. It will be very much an update of all of these things that we've learned, what the survey results were, how many people came and joined us tonight, the questions that we received so that council can have that whole picture. And that will be the next step in our journey. So we encourage you to continue on it with us and we'll see where we land as we move forward. So thank you again and have a great night.